Good morning, everybody. Happy Thursday. Welcome into 104 Through the Fans Coffee Break. We've got D-Mac, Will Peterson, Rachel B. Hill all hanging out with you. James Marilat will also join us in a little bit. Is anyone else sick of saying Bradley Chubb's name? Because it feels like that's all we talk about. But he got paid big, you guys. How are you both feeling today?
Chubb. This is it. This is probably the last time we'll talk of him, period. We're putting a bow on it as the Dolphins have wildly overpaid for a draft bust from Denver.
Yeah, I said this morning I like Bradley Chubb, the guy, but Bradley Chubb, the football player, was not worth that kind of money. We watched it for 4+ years in Denver. For him to get, over $100 million, $70 million guaranteed or whatever, it's a massive overpay. And guys, I was critical of the trade, but maybe George Paton and the Broncos dodged a bullet because this is way, way, way too much money to a guy who ultimately disappointed in his time in Denver after being the number 5 overall.
I was sniffing around it yesterday, and this was the only team offering a number 1 pick this year. I don't know if the Rams were offering a number 1 pick for 2024. Maybe they were. I mean, that was some of the rumors. I am stunned. Listen, is it a good deal that George Paton did? Sure. Yeah, okay. But his phone had to ring, not the other way around. And now you see with what Miami's doing, wow. I mean, they see something in Bradley Chubb that is just not obvious to me. So sure, good job getting the deal done. You had to do it. But you also got very lucky that a team, and there was only one team that had this value on Bradley Chubb. One. That's it. But it only takes one, and you got it. So good on you.
I was shocked, just like both of you, when I saw the numbers for it. So if we had to go into the mind of the Miami Dolphins, what are you seeing from Bradley Chubb where you're like, this is the right amount? Or are we just giving credit to his agent at Rock Sports Nation on being able to get a hell of a deal done? Well,
yeah, I mean, we watched the guy year after year after year. He was good his rookie year, and then he was hurt. And then he had a nice start to this year, but then didn't do much at all the last 3 games. So we saw glimmers of it. We saw flashes of it. But guys, was he even the best pass rusher on the Broncos? Like Randy Gregory, when he's healthy, probably better. Baron Browning, yeah, I think we overvalue him a little, but you can sort of see that trajectory he's on. You spent a 2nd-round pick on Nick Bonito. I don't know why the Dolphins think they traded for Von Miller, right? Like it feels like the Dolphins have this, we traded for this former Super Bowl MVP who wrecks games and wrecks the leagues. It's like, no, you traded for a guy who went number 5 overall, who never lived up to the hype. And ultimately, the Broncos didn't want to pay him. They certainly didn't want to pay him this crazy money. So I don't know what Miami saw, guys, because it's clearly not something we saw with our own 2 eyes in Denver for nearly 5 years.
Well, I'll tell you what I think they're doing is they're declaring that we're not going to be bad for quite a while. They're saying we've got our quarterback, we've got our offensive line. Now we need to figure out our pass rush. That's, to me, we've got our offensive weapons with Waddle and Tyreek Hill. What they're saying is, okay, maybe we are overspending, but we don't plan on having a top 5, top 10 pick for quite a while because we're good. We're a playoff team. So in order to get a high-quality pass rusher, we're just not going to be in the position to do it in the draft, period. We don't plan on it. So this is what we have to do. And, as of yesterday, Bradley Chubb was the best option out there. I mean, he did catch the most in a very heavy trade period in the NFL. Bradley Chubb fetched the most value. So you could reasonably say the Dolphins got the highest value tradable player out there. It's remarkable because I don't agree with it. However, it's all about supply and demand, right, guys? It's why Kirk Cousins got the deal he did. His timing was just right. And for Bradley Chubb, holy cow, is his timing right on this? It is outrageous.
It's just such a gutsy move because he is injury prone. Like, that's a lot of guaranteed money for somebody who, when we were all expecting here in Denver to be the Von Miller, Bradley Chubb duo that's going to wreck offenses and such, And then he was hurt for what feels like a majority of his time here in Denver. I don't know if either one of you feel like that, but I just feel like that was what we were expecting. It's what we never got, which is why a lot of people are saying it's a bust, but it's because of injury. It's not because he just didn't play well, Will.
Oh, he's a total bust in Denver. Total bust. You can't be the 5th overall pick and not have your name go into the Ring of Fame. You can't be a number 5 overall pick, top defensive player, and not get a second contract. No. For the Broncos, it's a complete bust. And then you go down the road. Do you believe George Payton, if they were 5-3, they would still do it? 6-2, 7-1, 8-0. I kind of believe it. I do, because I think this is what he's been telling Greg Penner all this time. I think that was actually a truthful statement because it supports what he's been telling Greg Penner behind the scenes.
Yeah, it very well could be. He knew the day he traded for Russell Wilson and gave up all those picks that Bradley Chubb was going to be a way to recoup at least one of those picks. So maybe Peyton had this grand scheme all along. Rachel, you mentioned something before about how he's always hurt. Well, maybe they're taking the Broncos view that they took with Randy Gregory. Hey, he just hasn't been on the field that much, so maybe there's still a lot left in those legs, and there's still a lot left in that body. Now, Chubb's had a couple ACLs, so that scares me. Gregory was more, hey, he couldn't, put down the bong, so that's why he was getting suspended. So maybe with Chubb, they're taking this chance that he's got a lot of football left under him. I don't see it because I think once you're injury prone, you're kind of always injury prone. But there absolutely was in the Gregory conversations, hey, this guy just hasn't played that much football, so that's why we're comfortable giving him this amount of money despite his age. And maybe Miami feels the same way about Bradley.
You should always look at teams that agreed to the deal in the first place as to why they did it. And this is exactly what the folks in Seattle, fans of the Seahawks, are probably thinking about the Broncos. Our reaction to what Miami did with Chubb is very likely what Seattle fans thought about the deal for Russ.
It's actually a really good way to look at it because I have had quite a few fins up in my comments recently. So I think people in Miami are actually excited about this. Will, going back to what you said, that's actually a really good point. Maybe they are kind of looking at it just like that too. It's actually an interesting thing. But
I'm just trying to put my mind around how they can give Bradley Chubb that contract this morning. Like, I know you just gave up a first-round pick for him, so you have to sign him long-term. Much like the Broncos gave up so much for Russ, they had to sign him long-term. But this deal got done. He got traded 2 days ago? Like, they had no negotiations. Like, his agent, it's the same guy who reps Kyler Murray, by the way, who got the video game, king paid as well. So clearly this Eric Burkhardt, I believe, is really good at his job getting these guys paid. Because if I'm Miami, like, why do I need to do it today? Do it next week. Do it 2 weeks from now. Do it 3 weeks from now. Franchise tag him and then do it next year. For them to just shell this out before he's played it down, I'm getting a little Russell Wilson deja vu, you guys.
Interesting. I have another thing that's kind of been popping up in my mind the past few days is the only reason people know about Bradley Chubb because of Von Miller, because of the duo that was expected out of him.
Bradley was, he's a freakish athlete. Okay. I'm not trying to put him down, but he's not Von Miller. And Will, to go just back up just to a second to your point about the Dolphins and why do the deal. Well, the Dolphins, they're giving all this stuff up. It is the same as the Broncos. Here's the difference, though. Russell Wilson had 2 more years left on his contract. You just didn't have to do it. Whereas Bradley Chubb is going to be a free agent in 10 weeks. So you kind of did have to do it if you want, because if Bradley Chubb goes to free agency, this is what's stunning. Guys, he might have got a better deal than what he just got with the Dolphins if he goes to free agency. So they just didn't want to take that risk. And mamas, have your children grow up to be pass rushers. I mean, it is, if you're lucky enough to birth a 6'4", 250-pound, genetic freak. if you can somehow conjure that very rare human being athlete, and they're just, there aren't a lot of people like that out there. Their value is off the charts. That is why, for example, a pass rusher and a tackle is more valuable than a cornerback, A cornerback can only do so much. A pass rusher can literally impact the game on every single snap. I mean, they have a tremendous impact, stopping the run, sacking the quarterback, putting pressure on the quarterback to make mistakes. You see what the value is, and we are in a pretty perilous situation, guys, at pass rusher. So just for a second, who are we counting on right now for pass rushing? You know, the Broncos could have done this deal. It would have been outrageous. I don't think they should have. But just for a second, we've got Randy Gregory. I mean, how many more games is he going to miss throughout his career with the Broncos? If he plays half the games in his career with the Broncos that he could play, he will equal what he did in Dallas. So why would we expect any different? You've got Baron Browning, who's got some sort of hip issue and looks good on paper. Then you have Nick Bonito, undersized dude, and Jonathan Cooper, 7th round backup guy. I mean, it's not that great what we have right now unless everybody somehow gets healthy, which they're not, and you're about to face Derrick Henry. How's the edge going to be? It could be a scary game against Tennessee. Derrick Henry may rush for 523 yards.
Derrick Henry's, though, kind of been all over the place.
Yeah, but he was huge last week against Houston. I mean, he was an absolute monster, his old self. D-Mac, I think you are keeping your fingers crossed, which is a tough way to GM your team, but you're keeping your fingers crossed that Gregory can get back, that Browning develops into this star that everyone can think, and that Bonito's not a colossal bust. And then that's 3 guys right there, and you mix in Cooper and you mix in Jacob Martin, who they just traded from the Jets. Like, those are your 5 names moving forward. We'll see.
Yeah, but George Payton drafted Patrick Surtain, so he's good for life.
I don't know if I want to go down this road. You know, I'm not the biggest George Payton fan either, D-Mac. Like, I'm on your side on this one.
By the way, it's not that I'm anti-George Payton. I just want to say he is a very average GM, okay? He's average. He's not below average. He's not above average. Right now, in his year and a half, whatever he's been here, almost 2 years, he's average. Now, the bar was so low because John Elway was so below average that it feels a lot better because it is. But we're not in rare air here. We've been sellers years and years and years ago. And are we going to sit here a year from now, knocking on Formica, and talk about the Broncos selling Jerry Jeudy? I mean, who else has an expiring contract next year that we're just going to give away? Because we need to build the team. Because we don't have something else that we should have got or we've already sacrificed because of the Russell Wilson contract. Is that where we're going to be in a year from now?
D-Mac, you said you get a quarterback. You got 3 years. Go ahead, Will.
Well, to D-Mac's point, too, and I want to elaborate on it. The reason George Payton's value is so inflated by the fanboys in Broncos country is because what he said. Not John Elway, the quarterback. Not John Elway, the GM, the first half of his tenure that drafted Von Miller and signed Peyton Manning. But John Elway, from the moment he drafted Paxton Lynch a couple months after they won the Super Bowl to the day he got promoted upstairs, a.k.a. told to, go get paid to go away, he was a really bad GM. And fans across Broncos country, especially the tough guys on Twitter who say you can't criticize anyone or anything ever, are so infatuated with George Payton because they were so sick of John Elway that they're not willing to realize George Payton has made mistakes, including hiring Nathaniel Hackett, maybe the Russell Wilson trade TBD, and certainly extending Wilson before he played it down. So we can talk all we want about Payton's wins, and he's had a few wins. Like, I'll give him that. Baron Browning looks like a win, right? But at the same time, George Payton's value gets overinflated in Broncos country because of who he followed up.
And that's a hard part about being a GM is it relies on a lot of players and how well they do. Example, Russell Wilson. No one expected this. But I do want to go back to Von Miller because he was at his press conference with the Buffalo Bills yesterday and talked a little bit about Bradley Chubb, and it just kind of warms your heart. Take a listen.
You look way better than I look because when I got traded last year, I was crying and I could barely talk. And, he was good. He was in good spirits. I had spent 11 and a half years there, and he, spent 4.5. So it's just a little difference. But, whenever you it just refreshes you, whenever you get out of, tough situation like that and you can go to a winning team that needs you to win right now, man, it just recharges you, and I'm sure Chubb is feeling that same way.
The fact that he said that he was like super emotional and he was crying, I'm just like, oh, because you don't ever think of football players like that. And I went back and I thought about his video, and it really did look like he was crying. So apparently he's a much prettier crier than I am, because I'm an ugly crier. But Von Miller, Bradley Chubb, 1 year apart, both leaving. Like we said, we're just in the selling point of what's going on here in Broncos country, D-Mac.
Yeah, it's rough. It stinks. You never got the value of the two of them together for an extended period of time. Bradley Chubb had 5 years here. They were all losing seasons. That's wild to think about, that he hasn't experienced that. So it was different. Listen, Von was here longer and achieved success, had a real home here. It's probably good for Brad. No, it's not probably. It's definitely good for Bradley Chubb to go away because, and it wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault he was selected by the Broncos instead of Josh Allen, okay? I mean, the most catastrophic draft mistake of all time, he, for his reasons, unfortunately, he's connected to on the wrong side of things. So just as a overall fifth-round pick, he's a bust because of production and injury, okay? But as a overall draft selection in terms of everything, it's even more catastrophic because of what direction you went with a pass rusher instead of a quarterback. I'm going to try to keep names out of it. And even a mediocre quarterback would have had a better, bigger impact. Never mind, guys. The Broncos literally gave up for the best player in the NFL. I mean, Josh Allen is going to win the MVP by the most landslide amount of all time. I mean, it's going to be ridiculous how easily he wins the MVP. And if the Bills don't win a Super Bowl, well, they're the Bills. They can always blow it. But it would be shocking. And that's what they're talking about. So, yeah, Von's upset because it's just Von had a really good heart. Not that Chubb doesn't, but Von had a very pure heart when it came to loyalty. So all of it kind of caught him by surprise. But it sure worked out for him, guys. He got another ring. And boy, oh boy, did Von get paid by the Buffalo Bills, where he wasn't going to get that money maybe from anybody else. And you know what? So did Bradley Chubb. So I guess the lesson here is be a really good player for the Denver Broncos, and somebody else is going to pay you.
Yeah, a couple thoughts there. No, it's a good point. First of all, people like to think that Paxton Lynch was John Elway's biggest mistake. It wasn't. It was drafting Bradley Chubb over Josh Allen. And that, is a harsh reality that Bradley had to deal with, that, as D-Mac said, wasn't Bradley's fault. He couldn't control that. So with this trade, hopefully we can kind of move on. We'll always have that what if, but it does sort of close that chapter. Second of all, listening to Von Miller there, he said it was good to see Bradley Chubb get out of a, quote, tough situation, just like with him. If I had told you guys 2 months ago that Von Miller would be talking about Bradley Chubb getting traded out of a tough situation, you would have told me I was crazy. Right. That's how colossally disappointing these first 8 games have been for the Denver Broncos. And it's interesting and it's a little harsh, but it's the truth to hear a franchise legend call the Broncos right now a tough situation, and he's happy his friend got a private jet ride out of town.
Yeah, so it's two different things. Was it the right deal and the smartest move at the present time? Yes. But what were we sold before this season started? Our very own lovable James Merilatt had the Broncos at 7-1 at this point. And, I think George Payton started selling the trade Chubb thing to Greg Penner once he saw how they really were doing. And I think he kind of amped that up. So it is hard to believe that you would have traded Chubb if you were 7-1, because you could have clearly just franchise tagged him, which would have paid him around $20 million. And yeah, okay, he probably would have been gone after that, but you certainly could have afforded $20 million for Bradley Chubb, and you're about to pay Draymond Jones, and you really could have swung that too. So they were actually, guys, when we think about it, you know what they were really preparing for? You know what George Payton really thought of this year? He thought they were going to stink. He did, because look at everything he did to be prepared to stink. Look at everything they did to be in the right position to trade Bradley Chubb. So while we're all out having parades and everything, George Payton's somewhere in the back like, But that makes it confusing, because if you knew the team wasn't going to be very good, or at least the expectations should be lowered, why did you do the deal with Russ? I mean, that's where things get screwy. Like, one thing doesn't match up with another. If you knew things were going to be rough, just take it easy there with Russ. And by the way, the Broncos completely overpaid for Russ too, with the draft picks and everything they did, because that's what you do when you're desperate. The Dolphins are desperate to win. The Broncos are desperate to have a quarterback. That's why if you're in the top 10 and there's a reasonable quarterback out there, never mind multiple, you go with the quarterback, not the cornerback.
I also would like to clarify, because I had people come at me on Twitter yesterday, that if I was in George Payton's shoes, yes, I would have got Russell Wilson. Yes, I probably still would have paid him, because no one in their right minds ever would have thought that this would be the case with Russell Wilson. But you can give credit where credit is due to the people that said, hold off and see what happens with Russell Wilson in the first part of the season. I would just like to clarify that, because everyone's like, oh my gosh, you guys are such flip-floppers. You guys go back and forth. No, we're just giving credit where credit is due. And those are to the people that said, you should wait and hold on and see. Okay, my rant on Russell Wilson and the contracts is over with. But I do want to talk to you guys about the Colorado Avalanche, because they are in Finland and they look like they're having a really wonderful time as well. But we do have some updates on some injuries that I think people are going to be wanting to pay attention to, because we're a little over 24 hours away from their first game in Finland. So we know that Val Nichushkin, so we know, oh man, I always say the name wrong. Will, you always save me. Hit me with it.
This one I struggle with. I think it's Justice Noonan.
No. It's Eustace Annunen. Sorry, guys. It's okay. Eustace Annunen.
I always, no matter how many times I'm like, I got this, I look at it and I'm like, oh man, okay. He's here on an injury basis. He is from Finland, so I think that they just wanted to bring him back.
They did. By the way, that was a really sweet move by the Avalanche to do that.
I agree.
They definitely didn't have to do it. And their goalkeeper coach is also from Finland. So they're nicely represented.
I agree. Nichushkin he's hopeful that he's going to play. He's dealing with a lower body injury. And then Darren Helm, who has an abdominal tear, is still a ways away. So a few updates. How much are you guys looking forward to those? Seeing, we watched the Broncos in London. And now we're going to watch the Avs in Finland. It's pretty cool to see that we're just all over the world here in Denver sports.
Well, I really don't care. But I mean, who cares? It's a hockey game in the beginning of the season. So I mean, I think it's cool. I would have loved to have covered it. I'd love to be in Finland and experience salmon soup and apparently a hot steam with 20 other half-naked guys. I mean, I'm yearning for a dip in the Baltic Sea. All parts of it seem amazing to me. But if you're not there, I mean, it's the Columbus Blue Jackets in November. What are we talking about?
I was going to say, I think we should have convinced James Merilatt to go from London to Finland, because there are a few muggles, as DMAC likes to point out, from the Denver media who have made the trek from London to Finland. Because as long as you're on that side of the Atlantic Ocean, you might as well keep going east, right?
Yeah.
With all due respect to Eustace Noonan. Eustace Annunen. Well, here's the thing. I like Peter Baugh, but Peter Baugh led that tweet with not the most important stuff. The two ones below it were more important, and that is the second Val Nichushkin left this lineup. They lost 2 in a row, a shutout, 1-0, and then an absolute collapse against the New York Islanders. Val Nichushkin is tied for the lead in points with Nathan McKinnon and leads the team in goals, and he's only played 7 of the 9 games. So love Peter Baugh, but he buried the lead there. I don't care about Eustace Annunen. I care about
Annunen.
I'm having fun. Annunen. Sorry. I care about
Okuwebanam.
I care about Val Nichushkin and his health. I also saw that maybe he had a little bit of a setback. Wasn't feeling as good today. So it's something to watch. To DMAC's point, it's hockey in November. But listen, I wrote about it at DenverFan.com. They lost Kadri. They lost Burakovsky. Landeskog's out 3 months. Nichushkin's not out there. That's 4 of your 7 best forwards from when you won the Stanley Cup that aren't playing. McKinnon, Lehkonen, and Rantanen are the 3 that are playing. So they need to get Nichushkin back. Helm, fun story. We'll keep an eye on it. Again, long-winded rant of saying Nichushkin is the news with the Avs to monitor right now. And the fact that he may not be healthy after all this time off is starting to raise a little bit of concern.
Yeah, I saw the lines that were practicing today, and that got put out there. They put Evan Rodriguez up to the first line with McKinnon and Val. Val was skating today. So okay, we're trying something new. We're moving Rodriguez up and Lehkonen down. And then the second line was Lehkonen and Rantanen. So Rantanen off the first line completely and centered by JT Compher. Okay, because don't forget, we heard about Alex Newhook as the 2C lasted for about 2 seconds. Yeah, holy cow, that was just
a disaster. Maybe they should have re-signed Nazem Kadri and traded Samuel Girard, like I said, but no one wanted to listen to that.
Man. That's a tricky one, dude. Because Girard just brings so much talent to the blue line.
They have 5 other good defenders.
That's a good point, Will. That's a good point.
I said all along the Newhook thing wasn't going to work and you needed to re-sign Kadri. You know what you're going to have to do at the trade deadline now? You're going to have to go get a real 2-line center. And you're probably calling the Chicago Blackhawks.
For Patrick Kane.
Guys, Kane, Tays. I mean, you're going to have to go one of them because
but
that's
okay. Hey, whatever. They did that last year. They gave up good prospects and quality players last year for Sturm, Cogliano, Lehkonen, and
Josh Manson.
Josh Manson, yeah. So listen, they did it last year. 4 significant guys. That's all right. I mean, that's part of the plan. But I will tell you, I don't think people should be freaking out. But to think that this team is as deep and as strong as last year, that is just not the case. They did lose too much, okay? And I'm not freaking out either. But they were shut out 1 time last year, and the Devils shut them out. They gave up a 3-goal lead to the Islanders, which is just like, what is that? So there are just a couple little cracks there that are surprising. It's not, jump off the bridge sort of moments, but hey, let's just pay attention to what the reality is. It's just, and they miss Landeskog. And I know what you say about Helm. And Helm's a more important guy for the playoffs anyway. I really don't care how much he plays in the regular season. He's a high-character, clutch guy that you need deeper in the season anyway, so that's fine. You can put him on the shelf. And don't forget, Curtis McDermott is playing like every game, which, that dude didn't even play in the playoffs. And then you got
but he took a tumble. He took a tumble.
Yeah,
Curtis McDermott with the cup.
I'm just basking in the glow that through 10% of the season, my prediction that Nichushkin would be a top 10 player in the NHL has come true.
It looks good. It looks
so
good.
far,
they need to get him back.
No doubt. So proud. You guys did mention Evan Rodriguez. He struggled in the beginning, but he really is starting to come out, and I can see the full potential. If he lives up to the potential is going to be the question, but I do like what he's putting out on the ice, Will.
Yeah, I mean, he has 4 goals now, and I think they've all come in the last couple of games. So he's starting to click a little bit. Listen, he played with Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and put up the best numbers of his career. Nathan McKinnon, Mikko Rantanen, Gabe Landeskog should help him do that here in Denver, much like they did with Kadri, much like they did with Nichushkin. That's a big gamble, though, that Rodriguez is going to replace all that production. He's not. So, yeah, Rachel, he's trending in the right direction, but they need Nichushkin to get healthy, and they need Landeskog to get back, and they need to go find a second-line center at the trade deadline because they screwed up this offseason with Kadri.
Hey, listen, you put me on a line with McKinnon, I'd probably get you at least a dozen goals, too. It's the fire starter line. Burakovsky went 15 straight games without scoring. They put him out on the top line, and then you couldn't stop Berkey, who was mediocre at that point. So it's obviously a move to get – it's 2 things. It's to get Rodriguez going better because that's how strong, McKinnon is personally. And it also is an effort to get more production out of the second line, which is what they did last year, too, when Gabe played so often on the second line. And then in the playoffs, you just say forget it because you can't mess around. And then you just put Gabe back on the top line with either, we'll see how it goes, either with Val or Rantanen, I suppose. We'll see how that goes. But that'll be your top line eventually. Rodriguez will move down at some point. The bigger news, though, and you're right, Will, and if we're looking for trade things, it did not work out so quickly for Newhook at that 2C to replace Kadri. In fact, not only did that not work out, there haven't been a collection of other guys to moneyball this situation, like 3 guys to replace 1. That hasn't happened either. And Nichushkin's just an incredible player, period. Also, very quietly, are we really getting the production out of Cale Makar right now that we expected?
No, but I think that they're still on this hangover from the cup.
Okay, but still, when's that going to click in?
It will
After
at
Christmas,
some point.
like Will said. Christmas is the deadline. Then you got to figure out your crap.
I told you guys a few weeks ago, DMAC, they could be 500 at Christmas, and I wouldn't panic. And I put that in my column the other day at denverfan.com. So maybe Cale Makar is the most hungover of all of them, but I have no worries that the best player in the world will wake up at some point. That's not a concern for me.
At some point. All right, we do want to welcome in our very own James Marilat because he's back from his travels to London, and we're curious if he would recommend heading over there. James, how are you this morning?
I'm great. How are you guys?
Your background today is not really that exciting compared to when we last saw you.
I know. I'm in the office, so I don't have Notting Hill behind me. I don't have the Tower Bridge. I've got some blank TV, so I apologize for that.
You should have put something on the TV. YouTube did something London-y.
I have no idea how to work anything in this room. Nothing.
That's fair enough. Okay, so James, I need you to tell us what was the best thing you did in London and what was your favorite food that you ate in London, because I'm all about the food.
The best thing I did, hands down, was go to an EPL game. It was awesome. We just went and saw Fulham and Everton. Didn't know anything about either team. Come to find out, Fulham is owned by Shad Khan, the same guy who owns the Jaguars. So he was there that night and walking across. I'm like, why is he here? And then we did a little research and put 2 and 2 together. But going to a Premier League game is such a unique experience. The fans are so into it. When I bought the tickets, 2 different times, you have to verify that you're rooting for the home team. Because if you're rooting for the away team, you have to sit in a special section. The bars outside the stadium, some are set aside for away fans, some are set aside for home fans. There is no mingling of this. It's not a social experience. It is people are there to watch the game, and they are into it and doing their chants. And it was crazy. It was a ton of fun, and it was a 0-0 game, and it was still a ton of fun. So that I would highly recommend. You know what? The food, people told me the food was going to be terrible. It's like being in San Francisco or New York. You just go to different neighborhoods. You walk around. There's restaurants of all sorts. Fish and chips was the worst thing I ate while I was there. Yeah, that settled like a piece of lead in the old gut. But the food was good. It was fine. The best thing I ate, it was a place called Burgers and Lobster. So it's literally a burger with lobster on top.
Yeah.
That was good. Sitting right next to Joe Ellis and his wife. It was a ton of fun.
Really? Wait, hold on.
Dropping.
You flew out with George Payton, Darren Muji, and Rich Hurtado.
Yep.
And you had burger and lobster with Joe Ellis.
Well, now I wouldn't say I had burger and lobster with Joe Ellis, but we did talk to Joe. But Joe and his wife Ann were just happened to be at the same place that we randomly walked into after the game, and we're an hour from Wembley. Like we're back in London, back in central London by then. Just randomly walk into this place, and there's Joe Ellis sitting at the bar. Could not have been nicer. He was super friendly as he always is, so it was great. But it was pretty random.
Hey, by the way, back up a second. Did you say there were bars and restaurants outside of the stadium?
Outside of the soccer
Wait,
stadium.
but hold on. I didn't think bars and restaurants were allowed directly outside of stadiums. I thought you had to get in your car and drive to them. I didn't realize that was possible.
Yeah, you had to get out into your car and drive across the interstate and go repark and all that. But the one weird thing, though, at Craven Cottage, that's where Fulham plays, you're not allowed to take beer and food to your seat. So you have to consume everything out in the concourse. So when you go to your inside the stadium and you're sitting there, it's immaculate. Like it's just the cleanliness is off the charts. I'm sure it has to do with, hey, it's a rowdy enough crowd. We don't need them chugging beers in the stands too. But I thought that was interesting. Like we just got our food and drinks and started walking up, and the guy's like, you can't do this. And if you don't like the F word, don't go to a game because you hear it constantly from all of their fans. It's like just the normal adjective and verb or whatever they wanted to use it for. It was amazing.
I do have one quick question though, and it's a football question, and it's actually a serious question that we have not talked about at all, but it just crossed my mind. We keep talking about, is George Paton going to fire Nathaniel Hackett? Is Greg Penner going to fire Nathaniel Hackett? The fact that Joe Ellis is still an advisor and was in London, are we not considering enough that Joe Ellis is maybe the most influential person in Greg Penner's ear, and that Joe Ellis, of all people, could still be pulling strings on what happens with the Broncos the rest of this season and this offseason?
That would shock me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
He doesn't even listen to him, though.
He's got he's got 5 other owners. He's got, his father-in-law.
None with football experience.
He's got his wife. He's got Melody Hodgson. He's got Condi Rice. He's got Sir Lewis Hamilton. And he's got Peyton Manning.
I will say this. Joe was there as a fan and a tourist. That was the way I took it, especially from like where I bumped into him. He and his wife were there just seeing the sights, and the game was there, and they were decked out in their Broncos gear. I think you're connecting dots here, Will, that shouldn't be connected.
And by the way, you got to know there are a handful of people who are just on the payroll because of previous work they've done with the team. I don't want to even name names because I don't want to sound like I'm disparaging them, but that does happen. You have an emeritus status occasionally in companies, and the Broncos do have a few people like that. But a lot of companies do too. I don't think they're unusual there, and I think that's where Joe sits right now.
James, did Joe have a smile on his face, or did he look like George Paton? Because a couple of the pictures we saw looked like George Paton was a little stressed while in London.
He had he didn't have a, smile from ear to ear. I'll put it that way. The fact that they won the game, right? This was after the game. So he was in pretty good spirits, but he also kind of had the, hey, that's a good one, but we got a long way to go type of attitude when we were talking to him, not to talk too much out of school, but no, he was in good spirits.
Yeah. Joe is, as my experience goes, was always very kind to me. I mean, at least to my face, and was always in a relatively good spirits about things for the decade plus that I've known Joe. I mean, he that's kind of who he is. But again, he doesn't have anything to do with anything that happens now. And I really do seriously doubt Greg Penner's leaning on him for any kind of advice.
I disagree with that. I think Penner would call Joe before making a major decision. There's a reason they kept him on as an advisor. In their opening press conference said, we're excited to keep Joe as an advisor because he knows this business and we don't. I actually think that Greg Penner would call Joe Ellis before making a big move.
I think that's much more about, hey, how does the networking work amongst owners and going to the owners meetings and, how does that all, I think for football decisions, it's George, and then it would be John that they would lean on more than it would be.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. I don't know if John even has Greg Penner's phone number. I mean,
Oh, come on. Come on.
I mean, listen. For business and NFL stuff, this is why they hired Damani Leach. Okay, that's why he exists. For football, if you're not just listening to, I think George Paton's trying to hoodwink Greg Penner right now. By the way, I think that just happened. I think he was selling them this, we're rebuilding thing, and Greg Penner has just bought into it because they fired nobody so far. They've made no changes, and whether Butch Barry survives the rest of the bye week as the offensive line coach, we'll see. But I'm telling you, that Justin Simmons interception, that win in England, that saved a lot of awkward questions. No doubt about it.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone's – sorry, James. I was just going to say, I don't think anyone's going to get fired because I think if you were going to do it, you would have done it earlier this week.
I agree. I don't think there's going to be any changes. It's status quo. They're the Rockies at this point. Doesn't matter what the results are. It's just status quo. But, yeah, you're right, D-Mac. That play – because right before that interception, we're sitting in the stands talking, and we're like, if they score here, Bradley Chubb should sit on the bench the rest of the game. Why he played anyway, is a little bit of a mystery considering how things played out, that they traded him and they had a first-round pick on the table.
I have a theory.
Okay.
I think this is just why he played. It's because George Payton is one of the most indecisive GMs you'll ever find. He hems and he haws. He has a hard time making up decisions, and which is weird because he has a hard time making his mind up, but then he kind of like overreacts in certain situations. Like he goes too fast, too quick when it doesn't need it, and he has a hard time making his mind up. But once he makes his mind up, it's like there's nothing that would stand in the way. I don't think he had his mind made up. And I think they were absolutely positively desperate to win. Absolutely positively desperate to win. So, I mean, I think that's part of the problem with George Payton and the Broncos. Yes, James, that made no sense. If you had an offer on the table for Bradley Chubb, he should not have even played. No doubt about it. But they're also desperate to win at the same time. And I get it. It's a desperate league, and that's why you do desperate things.
But they also said that things really didn't start to heat up on that conversation until Tuesday morning.
Well, that was one of about 8 fibs he said in that press conference. He also said Albert O is a big part of our plans, and we like Albert O. Really? The guy who can't even get a uniform on game day? I mean, that press conference was Pinocchio 101 is what that was. My goodness.
Yeah, and by the way, I did ask about the fans leaving the games, and I understand that's not directly maybe his responsibility. But I'm telling you this, if fans expect the team to win, they'll stick around. And that is his responsibility.
Okay, real quick, actually, with all 3 of you here, let's predict the Broncos record for the next 9 games. James?
6-3.
What?
I think they're a 9-8 team.
Based on what?
I think they're going to be knocking on the door for the playoffs and may sneak in as the 7th seed.
Holy cow. Rachel, great question.
Listen,
we get this answer. All right, James, here we go. In order for them to be 6-3, they are going to have to win at the Rams, at the Chiefs, or at the Ravens. Who's going to be that game?
The Rams. The Rams stink.
Rams stink. All right, we heard it here.
They're not any good. Merry Christmas. They're going to beat the Rams.
All right, so then they easily beat Tennessee, right?
Tennessee's the worst 5-2 team in the
history. We're going to smoke those guys. And which game are we going to beat the Chiefs, home or away?
Home.
Home. Of course. We just beat the Chiefs. There's 3 wins. The Ravens?
They lose that game.
All right, we lose that game. And do we lose to the Chiefs again that time?
Yeah, the other hand, go ahead and put the Chargers and the Raiders at home on that hand. The Raiders.
Boom, boom. And then Carolina.
That's a win. So there you go. 6-3.
There you go. James got it figured out.
James, I hope you're right. Will, I'm curious for
Arizona at home. Hell, it might be they might get to 10 wins.
I was going to say, I think you forgot the Cardinals and all that. You may have to revise to 7-2. If that's what you're going with. I've got them 3-6 the rest of the way. We're going to see more of the same old. The Jaguars win was, false hope at best. It's a 6-11 football team that will make major changes, and rightfully so after this season.
Likely they'll win some sort of crazy game on the road like they did against the Cowboys last year. Take your choice, whether it's the Ravens or maybe the Chiefs or the Rams. I don't know. They probably win one of those games. So I'll give them one of those crazy wins, and I'll give them wins against Carolina, the Raiders, and the Cardinals. So I'll take 4-5 for the rest of the year for them to finish at 7-10. Same thing they did last year.
Oh gosh! All right, everybody. Well,
but I hope James is right. I hope James is right, man.
I like optimism.
Listen, I'm not about moral victories, but you have to assess a team by looking at the entire thing. This isn't the same. This isn't the VJ team that was giving up 50 burgers against Philly.
True.
Right? If they don't give up the scoop and score against the Raiders, they were on their way to go up by 2 scores when Melvin Gordon put it up.
But James, did the defense get better or worse with trading Bradley Chubb?
Worse. That's why I hated the move. I don't like waving the white flag on the season. It drives me nuts. But at some point,
wait, they waved the white flag on the season and they're going to go 6-3?
That's the message that comes across. But I think they're going to be fine.
Huh?
Also, like the contract that he got, the salary cap is going to be at $50 million higher than it is this year in 2 seasons. Like, who are they going to spend this money on? People that just salary cap, go buy a jersey and put 0-0 on the back and put salary cap on it. That's fun to root for, you bozos.
All right, on that note, that's going to do it for Coffee Break, you bozos. Get it together, James.
Yeah, bozos.
T-Max and
Bozos.
Rachel B. Hill.
Yeah,
all hanging with you.
bozos. Yeah,
We'll be back
clowns.
tomorrow morning.
James very
10:30.
aggressive coming back from England. The virtual hooligan here. Yeah,
We heard there was a
bozos.
lot of F words, so we're just happy that didn't make it here. But tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m., make sure you come hang out with us. We'll see everybody then. Bye, everybody.